Welcome to the Brain People Podcast, a show where four mental health experts team up to bring you practical tools for overcoming mental health challenges. The Brain People don't replace your doctor or therapist, but we will give you some extra tools to help you on your journey. So join us as we fight mental illness, one episode at a time.
Welcome to the Brain People Podcast. I'm Amanda Anguish, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm joined with my co-host today.
My name is Dr. Katie Elsen. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
And we're going to be talking about maintaining habits. We've talked about in the past making SMART goals, but today we want to help those of you who are in the throes of your New Year's resolutions. Maybe you're having trouble keeping up with them. What are some principles? What are some things that you can consider in maintaining those goals and continuing out strong in the rest of the year? So Katie and I have been discussing some things, and we thought that maybe it might be helpful to give you a little bit of a background on where some of these principles come from. So one of the first ones I think is just to understand how our brain works. Mm-hmm.
We often hear the saying, old dogs can't learn new tricks, right?
Yep. How old is old?
And Amanda and I, right, just in the field that we work in,
Mm-hmm.
that is completely not true. So when you look at and understand the brain more,
Mm-hmm.
specifically what we're talking about is neuroplasticity. And we could
Mm-hmm.
probably do several episodes just on that topic alone.
It's a great topic.
Great topic. But essentially, right, neuroplasticity, neuro meaning the brain,
Mm-hmm.
plasticity meaning the ability to change, talks about how we can basically rewire our brain. Right?
That is such good, hopeful news
Yes.
for those of us who may have thought, oh, it doesn't matter. I can't do this anyway. I've been doing this too long, and so I
Mhm.
can't do that. So good
Yeah.
news.
So when we talk about habits, right,
Mhm.
and wanting to form new habits, if we have the mentality that old dogs can't learn new tricks, then we're already basically coming out of the gate with this
Mhm.
hopeless mentality, right?
Absolutely.
But then we realize with neuroplasticity that we can rewire our brain. So I like
Mhm.
to give like an easy example of this. If for those of you that are hikers, right, and you
Mhm.
go on one trail over and over and over again, what
I use the
happens to that
same
trail?
analogy.
Do you? Right? It's a good one.
It's a good one. It works.
So what happens, Amanda, if we walk the same trail?
If you walk the same trail, nothing is going to grow in that path.
Mhm.
You've pounded down that dirt and grass and flowers and everything, and that's what creates the path.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's defined. It's,
Mhm.
you can see it really well, and you're comfortable in it as well.
Mhm.
Now,
And it's easy.
yes, it's
Mhm.
easy. So those are your habits, right, that you have formed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say I want to start a new habit. Maybe it's one of
Mhm.
those habits that's like, oh, it's not really good for me. So now I want to go left instead of going right.
Mm-hmm.
So what we know about starting a new trail, it can be hard, right? There's
Absolutely.
brush, maybe there's thorns, you're taking a machete or something and cutting down, which would apply to life of like, maybe you're cutting things out of your life, making some
Mhm.
changes, some old friendships or whatever it may be. We
Yeah.
can really make this analogy the whole episode,
I know.
but for the sake of time, it's difficult starting that
Mhm.
new pathway. And sometimes you look at the right and you're like, oh, but that one's so much easier. And sometimes you go back to it.
And sometimes it's even habit. You don't even realize you're going
Exactly.
back to it because that's what you've always done. And so
Mhm.
the work even includes having to go back to the new trail and keep refining it and disciplining yourself
Mhm.
on it.
So we know that the new trail, right, then
Mhm.
becomes deepened and
Mhm.
that becomes your norm. What happens to the old trail?
It starts growing up again. Like
Mhm.
plants grow where you thought, oh, a plant would never grow there.
Mhm.
Well, it's not growing because it keeps getting walked on and stepped
Mhm.
on. But now that nothing is going over that,
Mhm.
now it starts to grow up just like the previous trail that you just worked on.
Yeah. And if you've gone hiking before, sometimes you come across this place and you look at it and you say, I think that used to be a trail,
Yeah.
right? It's all filled in,
Mhm.
but there's like faint traces
Yeah.
of old habits in our lives.
Mhm.
And so that's really encouraging to know, if we know that about our brain, that we can start new habits. And one of the principles that we gather from that is persistence,
Mhm.
dedication, commitment, and so forth.
Absolutely. That's actually one of the things that we're going to talk about today, because one of the things, and I guess we don't have to go in order or anything, but one of the principles of maintaining a habit is fostering flexibility. Being willing to try something new
Mm-hmm.
and continue with it, even if it's not the easiest thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we like easy,
Mhm.
but there is effort required and discipline required in order to start new habits and maintain them.
Yeah, and it does take extra brain work to do it. I think one of the things I know one of the things our brain likes to do is protect us, from having to do something new and different. But even just allowing yourself to be flexible and say, hey, I'm going to add some variables into my life, that can actually make making a new habit even more likely, because you're already used to doing new things every so often. And so this is not just, oh no, I've got to do this. It's like, yay, it's kind of an adventure because I'm used to being flexible with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So one way, if you want to change a big habit, is also just generally fostering flexibility in your life in small things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Very good point.
And how do you roll with the punches when things do? And I think that goes back to thinking too, like you started with, is, do I accept change, or do I think, oh no, this is horrible because I have to do something different? But the first thing we want to talk about is that, and this kind of goes back to the SMART goals, but we want to be specific about our goal. If I make the decision that I want to exercise this year, this is probably one of the biggest ones. I used to go to a gym, and I remember in January, it's like, where did all these people come from? That's a really big one that a lot of people do at the beginning of the year. But if I say I'm going to exercise, well, I haven't told myself even what kind of exercise I'm going to do. So how do I know what to expect from myself?
Yeah.
So do you have anything to say about, being specific about your goal?
Yeah. And I think it's not just sometimes when we talk about SMART goals, we're too limited of just focusing on the goal that you're setting. But being specific of, why do I want this?
I like that you brought that up, because that's actually one of the points that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Because the example you were giving with the gym, we're sometimes specific of, I need to go to the gym, but we're not specific to understand why I want to. So it's like, if I'm just going left in that example we gave, and I don't really know why, then naturally, because I'm drawn to ease and comfort, I'm going to go back to the right trail, right?
Yeah.
And so, but if I'm like, no, I know I have to get through the thorns and, the brush because I have a specific why, then I am more focused and committed and so forth.
And even being really diligent about understanding that why too, because sometimes people will say if they, going to the gym or exercising or getting in shape is your goal. If you make that goal about, well, I want to impress people at my reunion or something like that, well, then what happens when the reunion's over? Well, I don't have to exercise again for 10 more years until the next reunion comes. But if my goal is, hey, my body is a temple, I want to keep it healthy, I want God to be able to use me, well, there's no end in sight to that goal. And so I continue to take good care of myself, because that's a little bit more specific than, oh, I just want to, or there's a deeper purpose, I should say, than I just want to impress people at my reunion.
Yeah. It's an anchor for your goals.
And then if that person that you were trying to impress, you find out isn't going to be there, then there goes your goal again too.
Yes. And it becomes more of a lifestyle than it becomes just a goal.
Absolutely. And that's what we're hoping for, is these aren't just resolutions or fad diets and things. These are things like, if they're that important, they should be my lifestyle, not just something I do for a period of time. So the next one is, I really like this one, create a cue-based plan, or have something that, like, there's a like a reminder to do it. So this looks like, when I did go to the gym, I do other exercises now. I've added some flexibility, but when instead of just saying I'm going to go to the gym tonight, I know what I used to do. It was easy to go home and then get distracted with something.
Mhm.
Somebody would call, my roommate would talk to me or something like that. But when I made it very cue based, when I had a reminder, my reminder, it doesn't have to be your alarm going off, although it could be that. But my reminder was as soon as work was over, I drove to the gym. It
Mhm.
was just part of the routine
Yeah.
that I didn't go home. I took a bag with me because I knew if I went home, that might not ever happen. And just going straight to the gym after it became
Mhm.
part of my routine because there was a cue. Work's
Mhm.
over, gym.
Yeah. And similar to that, they call it habit stacking.
Mhm.
So you have the habit already of going home after
Mhm.
work. And so you stack another habit that you want to
Mhm.
start.
Yes.
And by pairing them, you're able to better accomplish, right, the
Mhm.
one that you want to do. So a
Mhm.
very common one, which a lot of people already do, it's I may have the habit of watching TV, right?
Mhm.
And I really like that habit, especially if you pair a habit that you like with one that you don't like so much.
Yeah.
But then you say, okay, I want to start exercising. So often
Mhm.
people will habit stack through taking their iPad
Mhm.
to the treadmill,
Yes.
right? And so you're pairing it in a way that also you have more incentive.
Mhm.
And sometimes even you could say, I will do this, the new habit that you want to do,
Mhm.
only after or until I
Yes.
accomplish this.
Mm-hmm. That, it makes me think too, because sometimes our habits are stacked already in an unhealthy way. So,
Mhm.
say for instance, as soon as I wake up, I grab a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want to do the cigarette part anymore when I wake up. So maybe I have to do something different when I wake up. So maybe my alarm has a different ringer to it
Mhm.
or something so that I can learn to associate something else rather than just the same old way. So maybe that would be called habit unstacking.
To stack another one.
To stack another habit instead of that one. Or maybe I change my routine just a little bit so that I don't automatically go to those places. Because, like we said, sometimes we don't even realize we're going
Mhm.
back to the habit we don't want to do.
Yeah. Now, what we're talking about, again, going back to all the things, the suggestions we're giving is based off of what we know about our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So before we talked about neuroplasticity, what we're talking about now, you used a lot of the words cues, associations, is the theory of classical conditioning.
Pavlov's dogs.
Pavlov's dogs, yes. And a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with that.
Mhm.
But let's just kind of quickly kind of review when you say Pavlov and dog, like what are you talking about, Amanda?
Yeah. Well, Pavlov wanted to see if normally he would go out and feed the dogs and he would notice that they would salivate, but he wanted to see, like, what if I added a bell to it? Could I get them to salivate just by the bell before even the food was introduced? So sure enough, if you do that every single time before the food is introduced, then sure enough, the dogs would salivate. And then he later took the bell away and then they stopped salivating and only did it with the food.
Yeah. So basically, that experiment taught us
Mhm.
how our brain learns,
Mhm.
right? By pairing things
Yeah.
together. And so a bell, like, doesn't lead to salivation.
Mhm.
But if I pair it with the meat or the meat
Mhm.
powder, then a dog will salivate.
Mhm.
And we're not calling ourselves dogs here, but we
No.
learn in similar ways of, like, let's say you see sirens, right? Or you hear sirens or you see the lights, right? Some people would be like, oh, I hope someone's okay. Other people might be like, I'm going to get a ticket, right?
Yeah.
They have different paired associations.
Associations, yeah.
Yes. So with, habits, as we're talking about, what we're talking about too is if we can pair things together, then we can better learn and be more successful in the habits that we want to form and maintain.
Yeah, and we do this all day, every day, and we don't even realize we're doing it. When you're little, you need your parents to tell you to brush your teeth before you go to bed. But maybe when you're older, hopefully you do this I need to go to bed. I have to brush my teeth first. But you're not even really conscious that you're doing it. It's just part of the routine, the part of the habit. And so we're constantly stacking these things all the time. We don't even realize that. Even driving your car, there's a certain routine. You'll recognize that if you have two cars in your family and you use both of them interchangeably, because I know one is a push start in our home and the other one is a key turn and stuff. And sometimes I have to remind myself which one I'm doing. But when it was just me and just my car, I didn't even think about it. It's only when I have a different option that I start to think about it. But otherwise, it's just habit.
Yeah.
So one of the other things we want to look at is making it fun to do.
Yeah. So similar to how we learn with pairing things, we also know that learning is based off of reinforcement, whether we have punishment, right? The type of reinforcement that we don't like sometimes, and they say, oh, pain is a great motivator, but reward is a greater motivator, right? And so if we find ways to reward ourselves, then we have incentive to keep, not just do a goal one time, but also maintaining that goal.
And the brain is looking for novel reasons to continue doing something. Yeah. That's part of neuroplasticity, why we want to do it again and again, because it's like, ooh, something cool is with this. And so even just one of the things that you can do is even just psyching yourself up for it. It doesn't have to have an external reward or anything like that, but just even like a pat on the back, like I just did a good job. I remember when I used to use a treadmill because I was in a complex back then. One of the things I would remind myself at the end of like going on the treadmill was like, wow, my legs feel really strong. And I would just keep telling myself that. And then the next day when I was tempted not to do it, I'd be like, ooh, but I really want that strong feeling that comes with my legs, because I had motivated myself with that at the end of it. So,
you know, it's interesting is when we talk about these things, we do this a lot with children, and then we forget that adults are just big children.
Yep.
Right. So with kids, we give them stickers and we give them toys or whatever it may be. And you can tell like how excited kids are and how motivated they are to do whatever you're trying to increase their behavior to do. But with adults, we just tell ourselves a bunch of have tos and shoulds without any reward.
Yeah.
And if our brain works that way, then how can we just pretend like we just have to keep on telling ourselves to do things without rewards?
And that's something that I've learned to talk to my clients about too when they're doing their resolutions or their goals, is focus on the pluses of it. Like if you're trying to quit coffee because of your anxiety or something like that, don't remind yourself how good coffee smells whenever you pass it by. Remind yourself how much money you're saving when you don't go through the drive-through. Remind yourself of how much time you're saving yourself by not having to sit through the drive-through and all those sorts of things, because that's what makes you want to continue with it versus, oh, I'm just going to go back tomorrow because I can't stand this anymore.
Yeah, that applies like in so many times when I talk about addictions, they emphasize focus on what you're gaining, not what you're losing. Right?
Yeah.
So there's an element of like with reward, not just as you mentioned, the external, but the internal of reframing, because there are, I would say maybe most habits, there could be a sense of loss, right? A loss of time, a loss of energy, but you have to be focused on what you're gaining. And the moment that you focus on what you're losing, it's then rewarding and reinforcing the old habit.
Yeah, I think I've maybe mentioned this before in a podcast, but when I was a lifeguard, we didn't tell kids to stop running because then the emphasis was on the running part. We said, walk, please. And that's the same thing that I use with my clients who say they're trying to quit smoking or something. Don't focus on, I'm quitting smoking, because all you're doing is reinforcing the smoking aspect. Instead, say, I'm clearing out my lungs and making it a healthy, happy place to breathe or something like that. Then there's no smoking even thoughts going through your mind. You're focused on the behavior that you want to do, not on the behavior you don't want to do. Exactly.
Now, I think what's somewhat similar to reinforcement, but also related to another way in which we learn through modeling. So children see their parents do things and they learn, the monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah.
But it's also related to reinforcement because one big, huge principle of having long, successful habits is who you surround yourself with.
even in addiction recovery, we talk about that. You change your playthings and your playmates. You know, if you don't change those things to a certain degree, you're probably not going to change your habits too.
And just think about, let's go back to that hiking example, how much easier it is to, hey, a group of us are going to the left. Like you don't even have to think about it to some degree. Like if you surround yourself with individuals that are, also having the same goal or similar goals, it just becomes easier. And it's the idea of, if you're trying to carry 50 pounds all by yourself, it's a lot. And changing habits, you have to accept the reality, it's hard. But if I share 50 pounds with, 45 pounds with Amanda and 5 pounds just for myself, right?
You don't know who you're talking to.
You're like, well, you're going to the gym so much, right? You can carry 45 pounds. But like if you spread that out further, like 5 friends, like 5 pounds each, right? It becomes a lot easier. And you see them doing things and you're encouraged, right? That's the reinforcement part, but also the modeling.
Yeah. And I think too, it's important to recognize sometimes we want other people to model things to us that they haven't turned into a habit yet. So like if you and I hadn't ever painted before and I was like, Katie, I really want to get good at painting. Will you come and paint with me? Well, if that's not something that is really something you're into, it's probably not going to happen for the two of us because you're not motivated terribly to do it. I'm not necessarily motivated terribly to do it by myself. So what's even better, I go to a painting class where everybody there is intentional about wanting to paint, or I go to, I did this when I was rock climbing. I didn't have too many people in my life back then that liked to rock climb. So I found a rock climbing group. There was no excuse not to go anymore because they had so much fun, and it was just add Amanda now and get her motivated to go. But they enjoyed it so much. It was contagious. I wanted to do it with them. Some of them would teach me techniques that I didn't know before. But imagine if I went with somebody else who's new, they're not going to have that same kind of motivation, and it's not a habit for them yet. So it's a lot harder. So when we tell people our goals or include them, that's great. But it's even better if we find people who are already motivated and in the habit of doing those things too, and join up with them.
And you see that across the board. You see that with support groups. You see that with gym classes. You see that with church communities, right? You're finding like-minded individuals and you're coming together for one purpose, right? I like to think about when it comes to, having that support of, they say you're the average of the 5 closest people you're closest to, right? And so what that means is, who am I surrounding myself with? I remember when, 7 years ago, roughly, I decided to become plant-based. And it was really difficult. But at that time, my friend group just naturally changed. I wasn't purposeful about it. And they were very health conscientious. And so it was just natural. It became easier and easier. But whenever I was around my old friends, it was difficult. Like they'd be like, oh, well, why don't you just eat a little bit? And why don't you just this or that? And so it's so important, like just the way human beings are. We're social beings and we are influenced. So when we start by saying, oh, I'm going to have this goal, and you're so focused on trying to accomplish it on your own, you're swimming upstream. It's really difficult. So make it easier on ourselves by surrounding yourself with individuals that also want to have that healthy lifestyle.
And some people might be thinking, oh no, I'm going to have to get rid of all of my friends and go to new ones. No, we're not saying that. Don't start with chucking all of your current friends and having to go out and get new friends. Start with just adding some people that you know are interested in the things that are goals for you or habits that you want to learn. And then as you continue to do that, you might add even more people, and you might be the impetus for your current friends to go in that direction too, because they're watching you enjoy. There's a reason why infomercials work, and it's because you're watching somebody be super excited about what they're doing, and you're like, I want some of that too.
True.
So if we engage ourselves in groups of people where they're already doing that and they're excited, we're more likely to keep up that habit too.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And if you don't, like you mentioned, don't have that, start it.
Yeah.
Right?
start a online club. I don't know how you all do that stuff, but
A Brain People podcast fan club.
oh yeah, there you go. Who are all into mental health and want to try new things. We're going to start that. All 3 of you out. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're not quite that big yet, but no, not 3. We're more bigger than 3, but anyway, well, we want to wrap up some of these things because we're running out of time. And I found a nice little way of kind of reminding ourselves of it. It's the 3 R's. So the first one actually is reminder. So having a cue, if I have something that sort of cues me to that habit, that reinforcement, that stacking the bundle, stacking and that sort of thing, that's going to be helpful. Number 2 is routine. If I have a routine, so maybe it's the same people, maybe we're doing a routine of maybe we're running on Mondays and hiking on Tuesdays and swimming on Wednesdays. Like there's flexibility, but I'm also doing it with the people. There's a routine to the people. They're already in that routine as well. And number 3, or the third R, is reward. I want to make it fun. There's got to be a fun element. But also it has to be flexible too. Like I have something that I'm doing that is, I can change it up. I'm not just sticking to one way of doing it. And then we also talked about another reward that we don't often think of as a reward is just focusing on the rewards of doing it. Like there are benefits of doing this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have wanted to do it in the first place. So just reminding myself of the rewards I'm getting from it versus what I'm losing and stuff. So any last thoughts?
No, the only thing I would last say would be a lot of times people wait for motivation in order to start, or they're waiting for that to just naturally become a routine. The way the brain works is we do, and then we get dopamine, right? So I just want to encourage our listeners to just hear this podcast and just start doing. And the more that you do, the more that you trailblaze, you will get to a point with your persistence and efforts and these 3 R's to be able to form that new trail and habit.
Absolutely. And so we want you to continue. We're rooting you on from afar here. Maybe you're not too far away from us, but we are rooting you on, and we're continuing with our habits too that we want to continue with. Do you have a habit that you're working on?
All the time. Right now it's been focused on sleep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My habit, I don't know if it's so much of a habit, but it's a new resolution, and I'm working on being more hospitable. Sometimes with a full day and days, I just want to be a recluse and stuff. So my new habit is to be more hospitable and stuff. So I'm working on that. So we're working on our habits too while you're working. And so we'll cheer each other on as we go forward. Thank you for listening. Thanks for listening. To hear more episodes, find us on social media, or support us financially, visit thebrainpeoplepodcast.com.